The sun was shining brightly, casting golden rays over the lush green garden, where the wedding was set to take place. White chairs were neatly arranged in rows, adorned with soft pastel ribbons that swayed gently in the breeze. A floral archway stood at the center, decorated with cascading blooms of roses, lilies, and baby's breath. It was the kind of scene people dreamed about, a perfect fairy tale setting for a love story. Emma looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. Her long, flowing gown shimmered under the sunlight, hugging her figure just right before flaring out into an elegant train. She wore a delicate lace veil, pinned carefully into her neatly styled hair, and her makeup highlighted her glowing complexion. Every detail screamed perfection, from the tiny crystals embedded in her earrings to the bouquet of white orchids cradled in her hands. As she walked down the aisle alongside her father, all eyes were on her. Guests whispered admiringly, some even tearing up at the sight of the radiant bride. James, standing under the archway, couldn't help but feel proud as he watched Emma approach. He was dressed sharply in a classic black tuxedo, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. On paper, they made an ideal couple. Friends often joked that they were destined to be together, citing how well they complemented each other. But behind the smiles and picture-perfect appearances lay cracks neither of them wanted to acknowledge. For weeks leading up to the big day, tension had been simmering beneath the surface. James had grown increasingly distant, buried under stress from work and uncertainty about whether marriage was truly what he wanted. Emma, sensing something was off, tried to talk to him multiple times, but their conversations always ended awkwardly or unresolved. Still, both convinced themselves it was normal pre-wedding jitters and decided to push through, hoping everything would fall into place once they said, "I do." Sitting quietly in the front row was Emma's grandfather, General Robert Hayes. To most guests, he appeared to be just another family member enjoying the festivities. But those who knew him understood there was more to this man than met the eye. With his military posture and piercing gaze, he carried an aura of authority that commanded respect without saying a word. His presence was comforting to Emma. Knowing he was there gave her a sense of security amidst the whirlwind of emotions she felt. As the officiant began speaking, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The initial excitement faded into solemnity as everyone prepared to witness the sacred vows. James fidgeted nervously, adjusting his cuffs and glancing around as if searching for an escape route. Emma, on the other hand, focused intently on the moment, reciting her lines with heartfelt sincerity. However, when it came time for James to respond, his hesitation was noticeable. His voice wavered, and his eyes darted toward the crowd, avoiding Emma's hopeful gaze. Unbeknownst to anyone, especially James, General Hayes was observing every move closely. Though his face remained impassive, his mind was sharp, analyzing the situation like a seasoned strategist. He could see the unease in James's demeanor and the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Something wasn't right, and the general's instincts told him trouble might be brewing. Little did James know, the man seated mere feet away wasn't just any guest. He was someone who wouldn't tolerate mistreatment of his family, no matter the occasion. And as the ceremony progressed, it became clear that this day would unfold in ways no one anticipated. As the officiant continued reciting the vows, the tension between Emma and James became impossible to ignore. The once romantic atmosphere began to feel heavy, weighed down by unspoken words and lingering doubts. James shifted uncomfortably, his hands trembling slightly as he held them together in front of him. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, guilt over his recent behavior, frustration at feeling trapped, and fear of committing to a life he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. Emma, sensing his unease, tried to catch his eye, hoping for some reassurance. But James avoided her gaze, staring instead at the ground or glancing nervously at the guests seated around them. Each pause in the ceremony felt like an eternity, stretching the silence until it became unbearable. When it came time for Emma to repeat her vows, her voice wavered ever so slightly, betraying the anxiety she had been trying so hard to hide. That's when things took a turn no one saw coming. James snapped. Whether it was the pressure of the moment, the weight of unresolved issues, or simply losing control, something inside him broke. Without warning, he raised his hand and struck Emma across the face, a sharp, stinging slap that echoed through the quiet venue like a thunderclap. The bouquet slipped from Emma's hands, scattering flowers onto the grass below as she stumbled backward, clutching her cheek in shock. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the officiant froze mid-sentence, unsure of what to do next. The joyful celebration that had begun just moments ago now felt like a distant memory, replaced by an eerie stillness, filled with disbelief and horror. Emma stood there, tears welling up in her eyes, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her heart pounded in her chest as humiliation and pain washed over her. She looked around, searching for support, but all she saw were wide-eyed faces staring back at her. Some guests covered their mouths in shock, while others exchanged worried glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the escalating situation. James, realizing what he had done, immediately regretted his actions. Panic set in as he reached out toward Emma, stammering, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, Emma. Please, let me explain." But his apology fell flat, drowned out by the chaos unfolding around them. His words sounded hollow, even to himself, and did nothing to ease the sting of betrayal itched across Emma's face. The first person to react was Emma's mother, who shot up from her seat, her hands clenched into fists. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she took a step forward, ready to confront James. However, before she could say or do anything, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air, stopping everyone in their tracks. Enough. It was General Robert Hayes. Up until this point, he had remained seated, his expression unreadable, watching the scene unfold with calculated precision. Now he rose slowly from his chair, his towering frame exuding authority. Every movement was deliberate, every step measured, as if he were stepping onto a battlefield rather than a wedding venue. The tension in the air thickened as all eyes turned to him, waiting to see what he would do next. James, still reeling from his own actions, hadn't noticed the general standing behind him. Oblivious to the storm brewing just inches away, he continued pleading with Emma, desperate to salvage the situation. But the look on the general's face made it clear this moment was far from over. Whatever happened next would change everything, for better or worse. The moment General Robert Hayes stepped forward, the entire atmosphere shifted. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding attention without a single word being spoken. Though his face remained calm, there was an undeniable intensity in his eyes, a look that could pierce through walls and stop armies in their tracks. It was the same gaze he had used countless times during his military career to assess situations, make decisions, and take action when necessary. And now it was fixed squarely on James. Emma, still reeling from the slap, felt a flicker of hope ignite within her as she saw her grandfather approach. She knew that look. It meant protection, justice, and unwavering support. For the first time since the unthinkable happened, she didn't feel entirely alone. Her grandfather's quiet confidence gave her strength, even as tears continued streaming down her cheeks. She straightened her posture slightly, drawing courage from his proximity. James, however, was oblivious to the danger lurking behind him. He was too consumed with panic and guilt, scrambling to explain himself to Emma. "Please, you have to understand," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear. I lost control for a second. You weren't listening to me, and everything felt so wrong." His words trailed off as he finally noticed the hushed silence around them. The guests weren't looking at him anymore. Their attention had shifted elsewhere. Confused, James turned his head and froze. Standing mere inches away was General Hayes, his towering figure casting a shadow over James like a storm cloud ready to burst. For a brief moment, James forgot how to breathe. There was something about the general's demeanor that made him feel small, insignificant, and utterly exposed. It wasn't just his height or build, it was the way he carried himself, radiating authority and purpose. James instinctively took a step back, bumping into the altar table behind him. The sound of clinking glass from displaced decorations only added to his growing sense of unease. "Son," General Hayes began, his deep voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Each syllable was deliberate, measured, and laced with quiet menace. "Do you have any idea who I am?" James swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Instead, he stammered, Sir, this is my wedding day. I don't think." "You're right," the general interrupted, his tone sharp enough to silence James instantly. "You don't think, and that's your first mistake." The weight of those words hit James like a freight train. He glanced nervously at the crowd, searching for allies, but found none. Every guest sat frozen in their seats, watching the scene unfold with bated breath. Even the officiant, who had initially tried to regain control of the ceremony, now stood paralyzed, unsure of what to do next. All eyes were on the general, waiting to see how he would handle the situation. Emma, still clutching her cheek, locked eyes with her grandfather. Through her tears, she managed a faint nod, silently urging him to take charge. She trusted him completely, knowing he would never let anyone harm her, not even on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. In that moment, she realized she didn't need to fight this battle alone. Her family, especially her grandfather, had her back. General Hayes took another step closer to James, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't raise his voice or make any sudden gestures, yet his mere presence was enough to send chills down James's spine. The young groom's bravado crumbled under the general's steely gaze, leaving behind nothing but fear and regret. "I may not be wearing my uniform today," the general continued, his voice low but firm, "but let me make one thing crystal clear. No one touches my granddaughter like that. Not while I'm around." The finality in his tone left no room for argument. James blinked rapidly, trying to process what was happening. He wanted to defend himself, to justify his actions, but the words refused to come out. Instead, he stood there, rooted to the spot, acutely aware of the gravity of his mistake and the powerful opponent he had unknowingly provoked. As the seconds ticked by, the tension reached its peak. Everyone waited anxiously, wondering what the general would do next. Would he walk away, confront James further, or worse? Whatever the outcome, one thing was certain: this wedding would never be forgotten, and neither would the consequences of James's reckless decision. General Hayes didn't say another word. Instead, he acted. With a precision that could only come from years of military training, he delivered a single, swift blow to James's jaw. A punch so calculated and controlled that it left no room for doubt about its purpose. It wasn't meant to maim or injure permanently. It was a lesson, plain and simple. The kind of lesson that would leave an impression far deeper than any bruise. The impact sent James staggering backward, his arms flailing as he tried to regain his balance. For a moment, it looked like he might fall into the floral archway behind him, but he managed to catch himself just in time. His hand instinctively flew to his jaw, which throbbed painfully under his touch. Shock and humiliation washed over his face as he realized what had just happened, and who had done it. The crowd gasped collectively, some covering their mouths while others exchanged wide-eyed glances. No one dared to intervene. Even Emma, who had been silently pleading for justice just moments ago, found herself momentarily stunned by the sudden turn of events. Her grandfather's actions were unexpected, yet somehow they felt right. Deep down, she knew he wasn't acting out of anger or cruelty. He was protecting her, the way he always had. James, still reeling from the blow, struggled to compose himself. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the reality of the situation. 1 minute, he had been the center of attention at his own wedding. The next, he was on the receiving end of a punch from someone who clearly outranked him in every possible way. His mind raced as he tried to figure out how to respond. Should he fight back? Apologize again? Or simply walk away? Before he could decide, General Hayes spoke once more, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "Let me make something very clear," he said, his tone icy but calm. "You may think you're tough because you raised your hand to my granddaughter, but let me tell you something. You're not. Real men don't hit women. Real men protect them. And if you ever forget that again, you'll answer to me." Each word landed like a hammer, leaving James feeling smaller and more powerless with every passing second. He opened his mouth to protest, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but nothing came out. The weight of the general's authority was suffocating, and James couldn't find the strength to defy it. All he could do was nod weakly, his pride shattered along with his composure. Emma watched the scene unfold with mixed emotions. Part of her wanted to step in, to stop the confrontation before it escalated further. But another part of her, a stronger, more resilient part, felt a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, she saw James for who he truly was, insecure, impulsive, and incapable of handling the responsibilities that came with a committed relationship. Seeing her grandfather stand up for her confirmed what she had suspected all along. This marriage was never meant to be. As the tension began to ease slightly, the guests started whispering among themselves. Some praised the general for stepping in, calling him a hero for defending his granddaughter. Others expressed sympathy for Emma, wondering how she must feel after such a public humiliation. A few even muttered disapproving remarks about James, questioning how anyone could act so recklessly on such an important day. Meanwhile, James stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The pain in his jaw was nothing compared to the shame coursing through him. He glanced around, hoping to find a friendly face, someone who might offer support or guidance. But all he saw were accusatory stares and disappointed expressions. Even the officiant, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, now looked at him with thinly veiled disdain. Finally, James turned his gaze back to General Hayes, searching for some sign of mercy. But the general's expression remained unchanged, stern, unyielding, and utterly resolute. There was no trace of anger, only a quiet determination to ensure that justice was served. It was a look that told James everything he needed to know. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. With nothing left to say and nowhere else to turn, James lowered his head in defeat. The man who had entered the venue as a groom-to-be now stood humiliated and broken, stripped of his dignity in front of everyone he knew. Little did he realize, however, that the worst was yet to come. Because when General Hayes made a promise, he kept it. And James was about to learn exactly what that meant. The air was thick with tension as James stood there, humiliated and defeated, his hand still pressed against his throbbing jaw. The pain radiating from the punch was nothing compared to the weight of shame pressing down on him. His eyes darted around desperately, searching for an escape route, but there was none. Every guest in attendance seemed to be staring at him, not with pity, but with disdain. Even those who might have felt sorry for him couldn't ignore the gravity of what he had done. Raising a hand to Emma wasn't just a mistake. It was an unforgivable act that had shattered the sanctity of the day. General Hayes didn't move. He stood tall, his posture unwavering, exuding the kind of authority that made people instinctively obey without question. His piercing gaze remained fixed on James, silently daring him to say or do something. Anything that would justify further action. But James was frozen, unable to muster the courage to speak. The words caught in his throat, tangled in a web of regret, fear, and humiliation. For once, he understood the full extent of his actions, and the consequences they carried. Emma, meanwhile, took a step forward, her trembling hands clutching the folds of her gown. Her tears had slowed, replaced by a quiet resolve that surprised even herself. She looked at her grandfather, gratitude swelling in her chest. Though she hadn't asked for this intervention, she knew deep down that it was necessary. James's slap had been more than just physical. It was a betrayal of trust, respect, and love. And now, standing beside her grandfather, she realized she deserved so much better. "James," Emma finally said, her voice soft but firm. It was the first time she had spoken since the incident, and her words silenced the murmurs rippling through the crowd. Everyone turned to look at her, their expressions shifting from shock to curiosity. What would she say? Would she forgive him? Or would she follow her grandfather's lead and put an end to this disastrous chapter of her life? James's head snapped up at the sound of her voice. His eyes pleaded with hers, desperate for redemption. "Emma, please," he begged, his voice cracking under the strain of emotion. "I'm sorry. I truly am. I never meant to hurt you. Please, let me make this right." But Emma shook her head slowly, her expression calm yet resolute. "You already did enough, James," she replied, her tone steady despite the storm raging inside her. "You showed everyone here exactly who you are, and I can't pretend anymore. This isn't love. This isn't how someone treats the person they care about." Her words struck James like another blow, though this one landed squarely on his heart rather than his jaw. He opened his mouth to argue, to explain, to beg, but no sound came out. The truth of her statement hit him hard, leaving him speechless. He glanced toward the guests again, hoping for some form of support, but all he saw were cold, judgmental stares. Even the officiant, who had initially tried to keep the ceremony moving, now looked at him with clear disapproval. General Hayes stepped closer to his granddaughter, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. His touch was light, almost gentle, but it conveyed volumes. It was a gesture of solidarity, a silent promise that he would always stand by her, no matter what. Emma leaned into him slightly, drawing strength from his presence. She felt safe for the first time since the nightmare began. "You've made your choice, son," the general said, addressing James directly. His voice was low but carried an undeniable edge. "And now, you'll live with the consequences. If I ever see you near my granddaughter again, you'll wish you'd never set foot in this venue today. Do I make myself clear?" James nodded quickly, too afraid to argue or protest. The general's warning wasn't empty rhetoric. It was a promise backed by decades of discipline, authority, and experience. James knew better than to test him further. Slowly, he backed away, keeping his eyes downcast, unable to meet anyone's gaze. As he retreated, the crowd parted silently, creating a path for him to leave. No one said a word. There was no need. The message had been delivered loud and clear. James wasn't welcome here anymore. As he disappeared beyond the floral archway, the tension in the air began to lift, replaced by a collective sense of relief. For Emma, the moment marked the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, heal, and rediscover her worth. And for General Hayes, it was a reminder of why he lived his life the way he did, to protect those he loved, no matter the cost. With James gone, the atmosphere at the venue began to shift. The initial shock and tension slowly gave way to a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Guests exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others whispering words of support for Emma. It was clear that the wedding wouldn't be continuing as planned, but no one knew quite what to do next. The officiant, still standing awkwardly under the floral archway, cleared his throat and tentatively suggested canceling the ceremony. His announcement was met with murmurs of agreement, though it hardly seemed necessary. Everyone could see the day had taken a dramatic turn. Emma, now surrounded by her family, took a deep breath as reality began to sink in. The dream she had envisioned for so long, the perfect dress, the vows, the celebration, was over. But instead of feeling devastated, she felt something unexpected: freedom. For months, maybe even years, she had been tied to a relationship that wasn't right for her. She had ignored red flags, excused bad behavior, and convinced herself that love meant compromising her happiness. Now, standing there with her grandfather's hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder, she realized she didn't have to settle anymore. Her mother rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so sorry this happened, but I'm also proud of you. You deserve so much better than him." Emma nodded faintly, tears welling up again, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Her family had always been her anchor, and today proved just how much they loved and supported her. General Hayes, ever the pillar of strength, addressed the guests briefly. "Thank you all for coming today to celebrate what we hoped would be a joyous occasion," he began, his voice steady and commanding yet tinged with warmth. "While things didn't go as planned, I want to remind everyone here that my granddaughter is strong, resilient, and deserving of nothing less than respect and kindness. Let today serve as a reminder of what truly matters: family, love, and standing up for what's right." His words resonated deeply with the crowd, earning nods of approval and murmurs of agreement. Many of the guests approached Emma afterward, offering hugs, kind words, and even apologies for not noticing the cracks in her relationship sooner. Some shared stories of their own struggles, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Others simply expressed admiration for her courage in facing such a public ordeal with grace and dignity. Meanwhile, James's absence loomed large, though few mentioned him directly. Those who did spoke only in hushed tones, speculating about where he might have gone or what he would do next. A few people admitted they weren't entirely surprised by his actions, citing past behaviors they had brushed off as harmless quirks. Looking back, it seemed obvious that James had never been ready for marriage or for treating Emma with the respect she deserved. As the afternoon wore on, the venue staff discreetly began dismantling the decorations. The once beautiful setup now felt bittersweet, a poignant reminder of what could have been. But rather than letting it dampen her spirits, Emma decided to reclaim the moment. With her family by her side, she posed for photos in her gown, not as a bride, but as a survivor. Each click of the camera captured not just her beauty, but her resilience and newfound determination to move forward. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, Emma sat with her grandfather on a bench near the altar. They didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary. The general simply placed an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. In that quiet moment, Emma felt a profound sense of peace. The chaos of the day had passed, leaving behind clarity and purpose. "You've got a long road ahead of you," General Hayes said finally, breaking the silence. "But remember this: you're stronger than you think, and no matter what happens, your family will always have your back." Emma smiled softly, leaning into him. "Thank you, Grandpa," she whispered, "for everything." Though the wedding hadn't ended the way anyone expected, it marked the start of something far more meaningful: Emma's journey toward self-discovery, independence, and true happiness. The days following the ill-fated wedding were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma, but they also brought clarity she hadn't anticipated. As the initial shock wore off, she found herself reflecting deeply on everything that had led to that moment. Conversations with her family, particularly her grandfather, helped her piece together the signs she had ignored. James's controlling tendencies, his temper when things didn't go his way, and the growing distance between them. What felt like love at first glance now seemed more like dependency disguised as affection. General Hayes wasted no time ensuring James understood there would be consequences beyond the punch heard round the venue. True to his word, he made a few discreet phone calls, leveraging connections from his military career, to make sure James wouldn't dare approach Emma again. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. The general knew people in high places, and while he didn't threaten James outright, he sent a clear message through mutual acquaintances: if you value your reputation, or your safety. You'll stay far away." James, humiliated and defeated, retreated into obscurity. Rumors circulated among their social circle about him losing his job after an altercation with a coworker, a fallout apparently triggered by stress over the wedding incident. Whether or not the general had anything to do with this remained unclear, but Emma couldn't help feeling a sense of poetic justice. Still, she chose not to dwell on James's misfortunes. Her focus shifted inward, toward healing and rediscovering who she was outside of the relationship. Emma leaned heavily on her family during this time, finding solace in their unwavering support. Her mother encouraged her to take up hobbies she'd long neglected, like painting and gardening, which became therapeutic outlets for her emotions. Her father took her on long drives to scenic spots, where they talked openly about life, love, and resilience. And her grandfather. He shared stories from his own life, lessons learned during tough times, mistakes made, and how he always prioritized protecting those he loved. One evening, sitting by the fireplace with her grandfather, Emma asked him something that had been weighing on her mind. "Grandpa, did I do something wrong?" she said softly, staring into the flickering flames. "Could I have stopped this from happening?" General Hayes sighed thoughtfully before answering. "No, sweetheart," he replied, his voice filled with conviction. "This wasn't your fault. You can't control someone else's actions or choices. All you can do is surround yourself with people who treat you well, and walk away from those who don't. That's what strength looks like." His words stayed with her, echoing in her mind long after their conversation ended. Slowly but surely, Emma began rebuilding her confidence. She started journaling, pouring her thoughts onto paper as a way to process her feelings. She reconnected with old friends she'd drifted apart from during her relationship with James, realizing how much joy and positivity they brought into her life. Most importantly, she reminded herself daily that she deserved better, not just in romantic relationships, but in every aspect of her life. As weeks turned into months, Emma noticed subtle changes within herself. She laughed more freely, spoke her mind without hesitation, and pursued opportunities she might have shied away from before. The wedding dress still hung in her closet, untouched, but instead of triggering sadness, it served as a reminder of how far she'd come. It symbolized not failure, but liberation. Her family celebrated these milestones quietly, cheering her on in ways both big and small. On one particularly meaningful afternoon, her grandfather presented her with a small gift, a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the words "strength and grace." "For every challenge you face," he told her, "remember, you've got plenty of both." Though the scars of that day would always remain, they no longer defined her. Instead, they shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. Emma realized that while the wedding hadn't gone as planned, its aftermath had given her something far greater. A second chance to build a life rooted in love, respect, and authenticity. Months had passed since the dramatic wedding day, and Emma's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. The pain of that day lingered, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it became a chapter, a difficult one. Yes, but one that ultimately led her to rediscover herself. She embraced her independence with a newfound sense of purpose, determined to live life on her own terms. Emma threw herself into passions she'd once set aside. Painting became her favorite form of expression, filling canvases with vibrant colors that mirrored her journey from darkness to light. Gardening brought her peace as she nurtured plants and watched them grow, much like she was nurturing her own spirit. Her friends noticed the change too. She laughed more freely, spoke with confidence, and radiated an inner strength they hadn't seen before. It was as if the storm of that day had cleared away years of self-doubt, leaving behind a version of Emma who was unapologetically herself. Her family continued to play a vital role in her healing process. Family dinners turned into cherished traditions where stories were shared, laughter echoed through the house, and everyone reminded Emma just how loved she was. General Hayes remained her rock, always ready with words of wisdom, or simply a comforting presence when she needed it most. His belief in her never wavered, and his influence inspired her to pursue opportunities she might have otherwise dismissed. With their encouragement, Emma decided to enroll in art classes at a local community center, reigniting a dream she'd abandoned years ago. The incident at the wedding also sparked important conversations about relationships within her circle of friends and family. Many admitted they had overlooked warning signs in their own lives, inspired by Emma's courage to walk away from toxicity. "You showed us what real strength looks like," one of her close friends told her during a heartfelt chat over coffee. "Thank you for being brave enough to stand up for yourself." As time went on, rumors about James surfaced occasionally. He had moved out of town, struggled professionally, and seemed unable to recover from the fallout of that fateful day. While some speculated about whether he regretted his actions, Emma chose not to dwell on it. His choices were his burden to bear, and she refused to let him occupy any space in her mind or heart. Instead, she focused on creating a future filled with joy, growth, and meaningful connections. One sunny afternoon, Emma found herself standing in front of a mirror, wearing a simple yet elegant dress she had picked out for an upcoming gallery event showcasing her artwork. As she adjusted the silver bracelet her grandfather had given her, she smiled at her reflection. This wasn't the same woman who had walked down the aisle months earlier, hoping for happiness but unsure of herself. This was someone stronger, wiser, and unafraid to embrace whatever came next. That evening, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers admiring her paintings, Emma felt truly alive. Each piece told a story of resilience, hope, and renewal. And people couldn't help but be drawn to the emotions captured in every brushstroke. When someone asked her what inspired her work, she paused for a moment before answering. "Life has its ups and downs, but I've learned to see beauty even in the hardest moments. These paintings are my way of saying thank you, to myself, to my family, and to everyone who believed in me." The event marked a turning point for Emma. Not only was she celebrating her artistic achievements, but she was also honoring the person she had become. Love, she realized, wasn't about finding someone else to complete her. It was about loving herself first and building a life rooted in authenticity and respect. Though the memory of that chaotic wedding day would always remain, it no longer haunted her. Instead, it served as a reminder of her strength and the unwavering support of her family. Emma knew there would be challenges ahead, but she faced them with courage and determination. After all, she had already proven she could weather the storm and come out shining brighter than ever.